I think my 1 minute is up. So then in the interest of time, we'll get started. We have a lot to get through today, so I won't speak for long. My name is Yasmin bin Humam. I'm a financial sector specialist at CGAP. FinEquity, our community of practice, is convened by CGAP, the consultative group to assist the poor based in Washington, DC. If I can get the next slide, please. I'll just give a brief introduction of FinEquity itself and MicroSave Consulting. So as I mentioned, FinEquity is a community of practice. We connect practitioners working on women's financial inclusion to advance women's financial inclusion globally. And we have close to 1,500 members around the world, spanning 450 institutions in over 70 countries. So we're really proud of how we can break silos and bring people together around this issue. We're really excited to work with MicroSave Consulting on this event. MicroSave works to further social, economic, and financial inclusion for low and middle income groups in the digital age. We're so glad to have them as members of FinEquity and to partner with them because they really bring their understanding of the behaviors, needs, and aspirations of women to the table, and we'll be hearing more about that later. So a special thank you to their team also. I'll just list them briefly: Akhand Tiwari, Parul Tandon, Jennifer Shapiro, Sonal Jaitli, Rahul Chatterjee, and Ishita Sharma. You'll see their names pop up. So if you like, you can send them a direct chat message to thank them for co-hosting and organizing this. On the next slide, I will encourage you all to live tweet. If you tweet with the hashtag FinEquity 2020, I've also listed here various ways that you can connect with FinEquity. Our landing page, our LinkedIn group, our D groups, on which we host discussions. As you saw in the previous slide, our platforms are geared towards sharing, collaboration, and creating innovative solutions for women's financial inclusion. I'm going to give a brief run of show just so that people know what to expect. Soon after I'm done, we'll kick off with some rapid insights from Gojek and Women's Microbank, followed by a presentation by MicroSave Consulting on some of the data that they're seeing on women's financial inclusion, and then the much anticipated debate, where we'll be doing some polling. And I really do hope that many of you will stay out for the breakout sessions, which will be small group discussions by theme. It's a great way to get you to know your colleagues in the space, to share your own ideas, and also to shape the agenda, the learning agenda of FinEquity, our community of practice going forward. We really do take these kinds of discussions into account as we plan future webinars, discussions, networking events, partnership facilitation, and the like. So I'm looking forward to a very engaging session, and thank you very much. With that, I'll hand it back to my co-hosts.
Thank you, Yasmin. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ishita, and I'll be your anchor for the session today. I'm a part of the gender team at MicroSave Consulting. Our gender equality practice largely focuses on women's economic empowerment, and we do this by enabling access to and usage of financial services. We also work to address structural challenges that women face in terms of agency over financial resources. So the end goal is to achieve enough self-initiated usage financial services, increase women's agency and empowerment over economic resources within the household. For today's session, we will be delving into COVID-19 and women, focusing on Asia. Throughout the session, our speakers and panelists will bring out scenarios where they feel that COVID has impeded progress of women's financial inclusion, and also cases where it has promoted adoption of digital financial services. So welcome to the gray areas. And a note before we begin, let's keep interacting via the chat box. We encourage you to please post your questions or thoughts and in the comments. And if it is for a specific presenter, please address it with their name so that we will get them to the presenter later. To begin with, we have a rapid fire insight session for you. Here we'll be bringing out insights from Papua New Guinea and Indonesia on women's financial inclusion. In the next 10 minutes, our speakers, Mr. Gunanidhi Das and Ms. Josefhine Chitra, will take us through their journey for designing financial services for women. Let's first look at the financial inclusion scenario in Papua New Guinea. To give you context, PNG records the highest gender gap, that is 29% in financial inclusion among the Pacific region. Only 5% female workforce is engaged in formal employment. Further, 2 out of 3 women in PNG are reported to face domestic abuse. And due to a lack of formal saving facilities, women often fail to get their fair share of agency over financial resources. Our first speaker today, Mr. Gunanidhi Das, is the Chief Executive Officer of Women's Microbank in Papua New Guinea. WMB is the first women community-owned microbank in PNG and Pacific region. It is also one of the best 50 companies for women among APEC countries. So they're definitely ahead of the curve in serving our women clientele. Mr. Gunanidhi Das has over 17 years of experience, of which 12 years have been in the microfinance sector across Asia. He's been working in PNG for the last 3 years, supporting microfinance institutions to achieve operational viability. So let's hear from him. Sir, you're on.
Hi, Sita. Yes, good afternoon from Papua New Guinea. First of all, at the onset, let me express my thanks to the organizer of FinEquity 2020 for this opportunity to share our experience from the land of unexpected, Papua New Guinea. Can you just next slide, please?
Yes, please.
When I was asked to do this presentation about our experience at PNG on the innovation that added women financial inclusion, the story of Miss Tracy Nikita came to my mind. Tracy is an informal young entrepreneur, mother of 2 from a settlement. She had her wish and ambition to support her husband in household expense and also support her parents at village. I'm not sure whether we can call it as a shop or she had a table kept near to the fence for her house and sells rice, noodles, tin fish, biscuits, etc. Tracy had her own reserves about green, yellow, and red banks functioning in PNG. As like any other woman, she perceived banks are for big men with big money, and her small amounts are not good for banking. The story of other women are not different too. Tracy represents majority population of Papua New Guinea. They lack physical access and affordable access to formal financial institutions. The traditional bank branch restricted to major cities and financial hub due to difficult terrain, and these branches turn costly for informal and rural population to access both direct costs like transportation, time, security, and indirect cost like opportunity. The financial service and product need by Tracy was as diverse as a high volume customer. Access to a bundle of financial product and services that includes credit, savings, bill pay, transfer was denied as traditional banks found it costly to serve the low value, high volume transaction customers. Tracy was looking for some privacy with her savings balance as she was constantly bothered by her contacts and relatives.
Guna, can I ask, I think you may want to ask them to go to the next slide for you. We still see the inhibitions of Tracy, so just checking in to make sure the slides are where you want them.
No, it's there, still there.
Wonderful.
So she was also worried about fraudster and feared that she may lose her money. She was tricked sometimes back and lost her money. Her card was stolen and the PIN was written by her on the card. thinking she may forget. So there are many challenges to provide up. Can you go back to previous slide? This. Yeah, yeah, go to the next actually. Yeah. So there are many challenges to provide affordable financial products in Papua New Guinea. Women's Microbank took special effort to address poor financial literacy and digital literacy, and as well as financial competence among women by conducting training and public awareness. Staff members and agents were trained about the technology, innovative low-cost product, service, and especially the importance of using biometric. Due to lack of technology providers inside the country, the technology partnership is too costly, and also at the same time, technology coverage, telecommunication coverage and internet costly is also costing to the institution and customers. And there are some cultural and religious barrier, superstition towards biometric. We bring the training and awareness among the customers and took opinion from opinion makers and community leaders to negate the campaign of not using biometric. And also during pandemic, it creates panic among customers and safety of using biometric machine. We added to the COVID-19 protocol using the sanitization of machine and as well as the customers giving the sanitizers to them. So can you go back? Women's Microbank actually developed a solution, which is actually that this particular slide is showing is Mama Bank Access Point, a mini agency model, which is we call that MAPS, designed for easy replication with minimum infrastructure. The word Mama means mothers, the customer with whom we usually work with. Women's Microbank is the first financial institution in PNG and a Pacific exclusively working with women. Mama Bank Access Point is a technology-enabled banking platform developed in association with the Fund Software and supported by UNCDF's Pacific Financial Inclusion Program with technical and financial assistance. MAP is featured with a biometric authentication device and a Bluetooth printer connected to the core banking solution in a real time using a tablet for customer onboarding and transactions. Tracy, when you see the picture, Tracy on arrival at MAP location use her biometric identity to do transaction to withdraw her savings. She can confirm her transactions using fingerprint and at the same time, a tablet is connected to the small Bluetooth printer, which provides the slips for confirming the transaction in real time. Customer can withdraw loan money or transfer between accounts through biometric authentication tool through this particular technology. We allow all the customers to do deposit without biometric authentication and considering the internet access. We also having the applied solution to with a special attention. So if you go back to the next slide, you see that Tracy is happy now, and she has given the testimony about her how she can able to send money to her parents, how she can keep her money safe, and at the same time how our people are making her happy by doing the small transactions in her neighborhood. So with that, these are the testimonies, and let me take this opportunity to thank you all for listening to this story of Tracy from Papua New Guinea. And we look forward for partnership to make many more Tracy happier in during this year and coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunanidhi. Mama access points are indeed deepening confidence among women to interact with formal financial services, which is erstwhile been very difficult. And we hope this continues to contribute to their agency over financial resources. Next up, we have insights from Indonesia. I will just slide here. Okay. So on context for Indonesia, Indonesia actually shows a reverse gender gap. 51.4% of female adult population is banked. However, there is gender gap in terms of usage of financial services, which has actually widened from 7% in 2011 to 29% in 2017. MSc studies in Indonesia show that women prefer to save with informal resources such as ROSCAs, that is rotating savings and credit associations. While 80% of the female labor force is still engaged in the informal sector. Our next speaker, Ms. Josefhine Chitra, is the primary lead for Gojek Public Affairs Research and Advocacy on Social Impact Topics. Gojek started out as a ride-sharing platform and is the first unicorn in Indonesia. So there's a lot to see what's going on there. Ms. Josefhine also leads Gojek's engagement on issues of women's safety, gender equality, welfare, and environmental impact. Let's see what Gojek is doing to encourage women's financial inclusion. So over to you, Ms. Josefhine.
Thank you, Ishita, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for everyone around the globe. I'm Josefhine from Gojek. We are a super app with more than 20 services available in 5 countries. So, next. Yeah, our main services include ride-hailing, food delivery, and also digital payment. Our ecosystem currently consists of over 2 million driver partners and more than 500,000 merchants, in which 96% of them are micro, small, medium enterprises. Today, I'll share with you how we help women entrepreneurs stand on their own feet through our platform. Next. Firstly, I would like to introduce you to Bu Lasmawati, one of the inspiring Mapan merchant partners from a small village in West Java. West Java is one of the city in Java Island in Indonesia. Mapan itself is a community-based savings and loan platform under the Gojek group. And with GoPay, or what the name of our Gojek digital wallet, and Pay Later is the name of our Gojek's digital credit card, Bu Lasmawati can receive loans for her capital to sell phone credit in her small kiosk and also access formal financial system. And with the earned income from Mapan, she could work her way up to college, and now she works as a kindergarten teacher in her village. Bu Lasmawati is only one of the stories of how Gojek facilitates financial inclusion and literacy. So from this table, next. From this table, as you can see, it's a data from the latest research from University of Indonesia. Many of Gojek partners apparently are first-time owners of bank accounts, debit cards, mobile banking, and also e-money other than GoPay. And the research also reported that the partners make savings more regular after joining in Gojek. Next. So now I'm going to share with you some of the key lessons learned on how we at Gojek try to help more women entrepreneurs be more independent. First is on how we create inclusive and also accessible technology. So this is a picture of Melinda Gates when she visited our female partners in 2018 in Indonesia. So after her visit, Melinda Gates wrote in the foundation's annual report that mobile phones are most powerful in the hands of poorest women. She further said that women are not only using their mobile phones to access services and opportunities, but they're also using them to change social norms and challenge the power structures that perpetuate gender inequality. So from this, Gojek acknowledges that women are expected to play double, if not multiple roles at home and at work. Therefore, our technology has to accommodate flexibility for women. So for women who have never stepped into a bank, technology like Gojek and GoPay and also Pay Later offers them a foothold in the formal economy and also a chance to be financially independent by being an entrepreneur in our platform, which all can be done from their home. And to ensure that technology can empower women, the design process behind the scene of this technology must also be inclusive by including female researchers, designers, and also female engineers. Also talking directly to a diverse group of users, not only based on their gender, but also diverse in terms of educational background and social economic classes. So we can make sure that we can design the tech solutions that really solve their daily frictions. So as a result of our inclusive and accessible technology, 42% of our GoFood merchants are women and 27% of them are housewives. So I guess this is the testament on how our technology can be inclusive for women, even for housewives. Secondly, we understand that tech alone is not a panacea to women empowerment, especially during this pandemic, in which 43% of the new merchants joining our ecosystem are the first-time business owners who seek additional sources of income because probably they just got laid off from their office. So meaning that they have no prior experiences in making a business. Therefore, we have facilitated the MSMEs to various capacity building programs since 2018, which has reached more than thousands of female entrepreneurs. We also share our training model on the UN Women's We Learn online platform, so more female entrepreneurs can access the materials. And lastly, to scale up our support, Gojek, of course, cannot do this alone. Therefore, we partner with the government and banks to funnel loans for the MSMEs and also boost demand for our merchant business. So in this picture, you can see Bu Aziza, one of the female GoFood merchants. GoFood is our food delivery. And she received a microloan of 50 million rupiahs from one of the state-owned banks to help her business survive during this pandemic. Next. Finally, I would like to circle back to Bu Lasmawati's story. Through Gojek, not only she empowers herself, but she also mentors other women in her village to be financially literate and also gadget savvy. So for me, this is an epitome of a saying that empowered women empower others. So thank you. And after this, Ishita might play a video of Bu Lasmawati so you can see a full story of her inspiring journey. Thank you, everyone.
Saya bergabung menjadi mitra usaha Mapan sejak tahun 2017. Saat itu saya teringat pesan almarhum ayah saya yang menginginkan anak-anaknya sekolah tinggi dan membahagiakan ibu saya.
Hoyong abdi gitu, hoyong janten putra anu soleh gitu tiasa. Kenging ilmu anu mangpaat gitu abdi teh.
Keuangan keluarga pada waktu itu tidak memungkinkan untuk saya melanjutkan ke perguruan tinggi. Namun dengan bergabung dengan mitra usaha Mapan, saya lebih optimis untuk mewujudkannya. Dua tahun saya berjalan menjadi mitra usaha Mapan, saya banyak membantu masyarakat untuk berpenghasilan dan membantu penghasilan keluarganya. Lebih mandiri, terutama ibu-ibu. Saya sudah berhasil mengajak lebih dari 350 anggota arisan Mapan. Pada akhirnya mereka bisa memperoleh barang-barang impian dan kita bisa saling bersilaturahmi. Dan pada akhirnya mimpi saya tercapai. Saya menjadi sarjana dan bisa membanggakan ibu saya. Saya sangat terharu, bersyukur sekali. Saya bahagia dengan menjadi seorang guru, saya lebih bermanfaat bagi banyak orang. Dan menjadi mitra usaha Mapan, saya bisa membantu ibu-ibu lebih berdaya. Saya Lasmawati, mitra usaha Mapan.
All right, so thank you so much, Josefhine, for sharing that. Indeed, women do empower women. Our studies also show that women tend to employ more women and reinvest 90%, up to 90% of their earnings back in local economies. So yeah, way to go there. So now it's time for the spotlight. We will have one question each for our speakers. First for Guna. The questions are the devices that you talked about at Mama Access Points, are they online or offline? And has Women's Microbank seen any change in use during COVID? I would request you to keep your responses concise in the interest of time. Hello, Guna, do we have you?
Sorry.
Yeah. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please, once again.
Okay, so the devices that the agents have at Mama Access Points, are these online or offline? And has Women's Microbank seen any change in use of these access points during COVID pandemic?
Well, the first question is actually, yes, it's online. There are only three things we use. One is tablet, Bluetooth printer, and biometric authentication device. And it is connected to any internet, any MNO, and anywhere we can go and operate those services. And coming to the second point, actually, it was difficult because when it was the agent banking and in Papua New Guinea, because of security, the real microfinance is not that much of coming into the rural area. It was difficult for us to, when the state of emergency was declared, all the local buses, PMBs were not operating. Our mamas, those are informal, they were unable to come to our nearest branches or agencies. And that was the difficulties for them to use the services at our place. So then what we did it as actually we went to their place rather than sitting in the our agency level. So we went to their place and then we use the COVID-19 protocol, but we make sure that they are using their money because at that time actually they were looking for their money, and our always slogan is savings should be the first expenditure. And that when they already saved money and they were unable to use that money, so it was really a nightmare for all of them. So we went to their place to use that money by themselves. So that was the real story, and we feel like most of the customers, they were really happy when we went to their locations and give their withdrawals to make use of their money during COVID-19. And at the same time, giving small loans for microfinance purposes and coming out of the this pandemic crisis, particularly financial crisis.
All right, so Mama Access Points at the doorstep. That's great. Thank you so much, Guna. We have a question for Josefhine as well. The question is, the pay later features that you talked about, is that a part of the solution that Gojek offers? What kind of merchants use these features, and have you seen any discernible factors that sort of guide the uptake of pay later feature?
All right, thank you for the question. So in our ecosystem, like I mentioned, we have more than 500,000 merchants, ranging from being the GoFood merchants, meaning that they sell food, and also we have also GoPay merchants. So for example, if they have any other kind of a small kiosk selling anything like FMCG goods, they also can be a GoPay merchant. To the extent that we also have social sellers, so essentially sellers who are selling their products online through social commerce or through social media, for example.
All right, so
this pay letter will follow them. Sorry, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right, great. Okay, yeah. So what I'm saying is this pay later solution is actually available to every merchant and including to the consumers actually. But the more benefit if we see consumers, they use it for consumption, right? But the greatest benefit is coming from the merchants because they use this pay later to also again becoming a capital for their business to develop and to take risks and to grow their business essentially. So I guess this is really one of the greatest thing from this pay later. And actually pay later is also not only one of the solutions that we give in terms of financing for our merchants, entrepreneur, because like I mentioned, 96% of our merchants are actually small, micro, medium enterprises. And sometimes most of them are in our informal sector. And prior to joining Gojek, they had limited access to enter a formal economy or even to get loan from the banks. So using, for example, GoPay daily transaction history, now they can use this transaction history as a proof when they would like to apply for banks. Or Gojek itself, we also facilitate partnership with various banks. It could be state-owned or not, private, either it could be state-owned banks or could be private banks, like Bu Aziza's story, where we help facilitating her to government and also to other state-owned banks. So it's really pay later only one of the options of other kind of solutions that we provided for our small micro merchants.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Josephine. And I realize that these questions are just scratching the surface and definitely audience would like to know more. So I encourage you all to please take up these discussions on the chat box as well. Moving ahead.
Yeah, just want to add, agree with Ishita that this is really totally just scratch the surface. So feel free to also ask me questions. Just connect me on LinkedIn or send me an email. Some of you also asked whether the presentation can be shared. I'm happy to share, so feel free to ask the committee to get my presentation deck. But yeah, so if you have any further questions, just connect me on LinkedIn and I'll be happy to answer. Thank you so much, Ishita.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Josephine. So moving ahead, as COVID embroiled the entire global community into a crisis mode, webinars increased for FaceTime. And apart from that, everyone was up in arms to do what they could to make it a little easier. And we at MSc also dove into multiple across geography researches to understand how our target segment, the low and middle income groups, are coping with COVID and what are their behaviors, how has their interaction with money changed. We talked to an estimated 5,000 low and middle income groups since April 2020 to understand these coping mechanisms, and the insights have gone into developing relief measures and policy measures to make sure that the economic brunt is not as much on this segment. With this, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Akhand Tiwari. Akhand is also part of the MSc team. He's an associate partner. He has over 15 years of experience in research and technical assistance across geographies. He's also the gender lead. And I know that sounds like, whoa, man, gender lead. But believe me, more than once, he has made me realize how deeply ingrained gender norms and social biases are even within women. So I will hand this over to him to now share what we found on our multiple COVID researches of women's adoption of digital financial services.
Thank you, Ishita, for the nice introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and yeah, close to bedtime time zones, people who have joined us from there as well. Warm wishes to and greetings to everyone. I mean, 2020 has not been easy, and you know, social, financial, family-related issues, all those challenges have been difficult for us. As Ishita pointed out, we did a lot of studies, and I wanted to give a very brief introduction or presentation on those insights to the debate that we have planned for our participants today. So, I mean, we, in terms of economic downsides, we did find that there were more women for whom incomes decreased than for men. And one of the key parameters that we looked at was the savings that women were doing in the self-help groups. These are women collectives in India, and we realized that a quarter of them were not able to do any other savings. And for both of these, it was, it's critical to know that whenever it is an economic crisis in the house, the women are first to lose the money that they were having. So I mean, it did not come as a surprise, but yeah, it again, sort of highlighted the point that there are these very strong structural issues with regards to social norms, gender norms in the society. Same is the case with the unpaid work. For 34% women, the unpaid work increased. And of course, it was more hygiene related activities, more childcare, but also because there were more people at the home and they all wanted, their own, specific attention. We did also see that, in other aspects, both education, healthcare, etc., there are many anecdotal evidences that we have that women were, more negatively sort of influenced. But we also were able to do some empirical studies on it, and we asked, respondents in Indonesia whether, if they face any challenges in accessing healthcare. We find 16 percentage point gender gap with regards to access to healthcare, and this could be because of restricted mobility, because many hospitals were turned into COVID hospitals. So the next door hospital which I used to go to is now a COVID hospital, and I can't really frequent that hospital. So those sort of situations were there, but yeah, women respondents did say that they were more impacted than men. Moving on, I mean, we also tried to look at the digital uptake and how women are using these digital interfaces. And here we have we actually took a cue from the Findex data, and way back in 2017, we learned that, for example, in India, 35% of men were using any form of digital payments. In our studies, we did see these percentages higher, and I mean, as we are using these figures, these are very indicative in nature. They cannot be compared. Findex has a different data sampling strategy altogether. Our studies, the recent ones on the COVID, are essentially on the LMI segment, but it does give us an indication that overall digital payments or access to digital interfaces for financial services has increased, but it also shows that the gender gap has persisted. I mean, there is another, data point which I would like to highlight, that we asked respondents, if your time on phone has increased. For men, 79% men said yes, their time on phone has increased. So we still see a 12 percentage point gap here. And there were specific questions on how did you install a payment interface, and specifically for India, close to 6.8% women said they have installed a new application, compared to 14.8. I mean, close to 15% men saying that they installed a new digital application. And all of this data, I mean, they got us curious, and we wanted to dig deeper into why this is happening. And of course, I mean, we were aware of these fundamental structural issues which are there, regards to access to resources or gender norms which are in place, which impede these adoption. We actually, but we still were curious, so we led an inquiry, and this was very behavioral. We used to do this. We used a elephant path rider framework, and I mean, we used to do it quite back, in our qualitative inquiries earlier, and then we use the same framework again. And before I give you an example of what did we find, I'll take a minute to also tell you what this elephant path rider framework is. This essentially is from the work done by Heath Brothers and this famous book called Switch. And they say, an action will happen when your emotional side or your rational side plus the external environment, all of them are in line. Emotional side is essentially, is like an elephant. So it's very, easy to persuade, but a lot of context drives the elephant. it's similar to, an elephant where they see green grasses, they would go if they have to drink water. Whatever, barriers are on the road, they would go and, drink that water. So elephant is the emotional mind. And then there are these rational side, which get influenced by the facts and what you hear. The first assimilation or the first recipient of any new information change in context is the rational mind, and emotional side is more sort of system 2 that we would know. But then system 2 would drive a lot of actions also, because it directly influences the rider and the path. But I mean, amongst all of this, the path is also critical. And if I draw a parallel to financial services, the path is all about, do you have, you go to an agent point and then you realize, oh, I do not have the KYC. So having a right KYC becomes a path barrier. Then there are these risks also. And in a forest settings, we would identify them as rhinos or snakes. But I mean, you go to an agent point, you want to do a transaction, and then you realize, okay, I mean, this involves a fee, and this involves an extra fee, and this is like, okay, I did not think about it. So we try to use this framework and understand these user journeys a bit better. We recruited close to 70 respondents, and we were trying to identify the first time users. So, I mean, it was during the COVID times, it was in fact difficult, but we could speak to 15 unique users who used any form of digital payments for the first time in their lives, and a lot of them were women. So I mean, I would not take much time. Of course, the study is out. I would encourage all of us to read our analysis as well. But I would like to highlight a couple of observations here. I mean, one is on confidence. The other is on and the other related one is on something will go wrong in this entire process. We did find that a lot of users and a lot of people whom we spoke to, they feared that I do not know what will happen if something goes wrong. And this was true for both men and women, but it was more pronounced for women. And this could be because because of the challenges of control of resources. They may not have as much control as the men have. It could also be because of the quantum of money which is under their control. So and there are more questions if something goes wrong. So all of this means there is even poorer or even lower confidence in women than men. Does it tell us anything? Does it give us a prompt on how do we want to design for women? Can there be mechanisms which can be pulled in, which builds this confidence? We have theories, and I mean, in the case of Kajal, for example, her journey we are trying to show, she's in her late 30s, and she works with a government office, so she's not that illiterate. Also, she has that she's working and with the government. So, and even then she shows this lack of confidence. It's a similar data point. We spoke to women who are working with garment factories. More than 50, close to 57% women said that they don't use ATM because of the fear of doing something wrong in the ATM. So this confidence building through our processes is definitely one question that we would want to look at. In our report, we do talk about whether it is a loss aversion issue, whether this is a big change happening in the life and we want to shrink the change so that these steps are closer. But again, we'll have to keep in mind that the technology is progressing at a fast pace. And I remember, and Renana Ban is here, when I spoke to her, close to an year ago, and I told her about a few of the fintech innovations which are happening. She said, okay, but these are happening at a fast pace. Women also need to pick it up quite fast. So I'll stop here. I'll not take much time as we start into the panel, but I wanted to present this as a food for thought for all of us. So thank you, Ishita. Back to you.
Thanks, Akhand. Thank you for taking those lines from my part. Okay, so we see that COVID has definitely amplified the impact on women and has worsened pre-existing inequalities. But is it too early to say that we can use the crisis to mitigate the digital gender divide? So there are two polar opposite opinions, and how do we sort of come to a conclusion? The good old way, let's debate. So while our panelists will definitely have compelling arguments for both the sides, we want to know where you stand. So you will now see some poll question on your screens. Please participate in the poll, and we'll have a similar poll at the end of the debate. All right. A lot of people are leaning towards yes, it has exacerbated the gender digital divide. Let's see if our panelists can do something to sway them.
I will be closing the poll in 10 seconds, just to allow anyone who hasn't
All right.
voted yet.
Wow, so 88% people say that COVID-19 is exacerbating the gender digital divide. Great. Thanks so much for participating in the poll. Daniel, I'll just stop and share the results and go ahead.
Yeah, you can remove it from your screen. Registration,
Right.
yeah.
Great. Okay, so moving ahead, let's quickly learn about our panelists. Moderating our session today will be Ms. Subhalakshmi Nandi. She's a senior program officer in the gender equality team at India Country Office with the Melinda Gates Foundation. She leads the execution of Foundation's gender practice strategy in India, and that is primarily focused on enhancing women's economic empowerment. Speaking for the position that is COVID has exacerbated the gender digital divide, will be Dr. Sita Sumrit. She's currently the head of Poverty Eradication and Gender Division and the Assistant Director of Human Development Directorate at ASEAN Secretariat. She's based out of Jakarta, Indonesia. Ms. Renana Jhabvala. She's an Indian social worker who has been active for decades in organizing women in the informal economy in trade unions, cooperatives, and financial institutions. She's currently the president of SEWA Bharat, the All India Federation of Self-Employed Women's Associations. Arguing against the position that COVID has bridged the gender digital divide would be Ms. Moonmoon Shehrin. She's the lead for the digital cluster unit of BRAC Microfinance in Bangladesh. Under her leadership, the unit works to ensure that digital financial products and services offered by BRAC are efficient and customer-centric in design. Mr. Krishna Thacker, he heads the Asia operations for MetLife Foundation. He's responsible for advancing the foundation's mission and commitment to bring financial inclusion to unbanked individuals and families in the region. And I think I should have led with that. He's the only male in the panel. So Akhand and Krishna, quite courageous of you, I must say. So let's see how this goes. I will now hand this over to Ms. Subhalakshmi to moderate the debate.
Thanks so much, Ishita. And this has been a fascinating morning for me, just listening to all the presentations before. And I know the next hour is going to be even more exciting with this debate hotting up. I do want to say that I think with this, this unprecedented position that we are all in, working from home and really being online, has actually, forced many of us into a kind of a digitization that was never before possible. For me, it's been terrific. It's been empowering. It's been, my ability to connect with family and friends, the chance to attend webinars where you are not able to travel. And I think and also I think this whole networking and connecting with others in the space has been really empowering. But I do think that a lot of what we were hearing in the poll right now is reflective of what's happening to a large majority of women and men globally, particularly those at the bottom end of the pyramid, right? I mean, we are talking about already there being inequality and lack of access to digital assets, particularly when it comes to the gender divide, we've also heard of other things, as Akhand was talking about, levels of confidence, how these norms really operate. I mean, one of the most poignant things I heard over the last few months is when a young girl said that, I didn't have the money, or I couldn't go out to even recharge my phone. So how will I even attend my school classes? And these are really the low income households that we are talking about. So the verdict is really out that, has this forced digitization created the opportunity? Has it not created the opportunity? Has it in fact exacerbated the digital divide? And I'm really looking forward to what each of the panelists have to say. How we'll start is we'll actually, the first round, I'm going to request Renana Ben and Moonmoon to actually share their perspectives. Like, really, I mean, and really, what we are debating here is it exacerbating the gender digital divide? And my statement to you, perhaps just based on the poll, is that yes, it is indeed exacerbating the gender digital divide. Are you for the motion? Are you against the motion? What does your experience say? What does the evidence from the ground say? And without much ado, I'm just going to hand over to Renana Ben to kick off the discussion, and then we'll come to you, Moonmoon. Over to you, Renana Ben.
Thank you so much, Subhalakshmi. And let me just check I'm visible and audible, right? Okay. So I wish I was speaking for the debate, against the motion, because I would really like to be positive. And in my own life, like you pointed out, Subhalakshmi, one has become far more digital, always on Zoom, meeting people who don't live nearby, attending many more seminars or webinars than one would normally. But I really need to speak for the majority of women. And in India, at least, these are the women in the informal economy, the women who are the lowest 60% in terms of income. And I think the fault lines during COVID have come out very clearly. And the fault lines in COVID, as far as women and digital access goes, were already there. I'm going to quote some figures, but there are so many different studies quoting many different figures, because we did a study on what is available. Anyway, I'll quote what I have. So there's a figure from the PEW, the Pew Center, which says that in India, only 17% of women actually own smartphones, whereas 34% of men do. And another study from the MIRB, which said 30% of women access the internet, whereas 71% of men do. So basically, double the number of men have digital assets or access digital software than women. And I'm afraid that did not change over the course of the lockdown, and then as lockdown opens, but problems persist. I'd like to say some of the things that we saw among our membership. We have a membership in SEWA of about 17 lakh, 1.7 million women. And although we did do studies, I'm not going to use figures here, but what did we see? Firstly, two major things happened. One was that people lost money. They became poorer. They didn't have access to work. And secondly, the whole family was at home. Losing money meant that often it was the woman whose digital access declined. Women, when a phone had to be recharged, the women could not recharge their phones. We even saw in some cases where the family was desperate, they sold their assets. And amazingly, one of the first assets to go was the smartphone if the woman owned it. The men's smartphones were not sold. Even if a woman owned a smartphone, it was taken over by the children because they wanted to act. One was they were bored. Secondly, some of them were able to access online education. They had no other place to go, no other way to do it. So they took over the phone. And of course, it was the mother's phone which was taken over. Beyond that, I would say that women's, I think Akhand Tiwari talked about the lack of confidence, and that came out a lot because there were a lot of benefits that were being given by the government. There were fintech benefits, cash benefits, and so on. And I must say, and this is something that is actually against the motion, that the government did give out cash, especially to women, and less to men, though there were some schemes which went to men. And unfortunately, many of the schemes which went to women, they were not able to access for 2 or 3 reasons. One was not being able to go out, and men were less likely to allow the women to go out to the banks. And secondly, again, the lack of knowledge, the lack of confidence, they weren't able to access, where the men were able to access their benefits much easier. So what we saw over the lockdown and now as the economy opens up is that women have lost their assets wherever they owned them. Where they did not lose their assets, they lost recharge. So, that was not paid for. And that still continues, we find, because work is still very difficult, not available. We found that they were less able to access the benefits that government was giving. And we found that because of the whole family being home, they sort of had to give up whatever assets they did have, digital assets they did have. So these are, of course, not figures, and I don't know if anybody has any figures on COVID and digital access, but these are the incidents that we found as we worked very closely with our members.
Thank you, Renana Ben. Very sobering picture of some of the realities on ground that SEWA has experienced, and thank you for sharing with us. I'm going to now request Moonmoon. We'd love to hear from you on whether you think COVID has exacerbated the gender digital divide or not.
Sure. Good morning to all of you from Bangladesh. Thank you for the question. And it is evident that there is a gap between men and women in terms of phone ownership and wallets. But what we always need to work towards is reducing this gap. And the digital divide also falls along the lines of age and literacy. Older, less educated people, men and women, seem to have harder time adopting these digital financial services. And whereas you will see that young educated women, they learn quite fast when it comes to digital wallets or phones. So a study by Guy Stewart showed that it was a garment workers' diaries, where they showed that young and educated women are more able to transfer money, check their balance, or withdraw the money. And more older and less educated women, it was more difficult for them. And even people who are more comfortable with digital skills, they were able to do the similar things with digital wallets. But what we have seen from our BRAC experience is that before the pandemic, whenever we tried to give any digital interventions, we always found it difficult to convince our clients, especially women, to adopt digital services. But during the pandemic, I think it was sort of a silver lining for us. When we thought of distributing savings or cash transfers to our clients through their digital wallets, what we saw was it was quite easy to do that because of the fact that when we started opening wallets or when we started distributing the fund transfer to their digital wallets, other people saw that it was beneficial and they themselves went to the agents or took our assistance to open wallets. We even introduced loan installment payments through digital means. And what we have seen is this really encouraged them to be more tech savvy or trying to adopt it. And for many women who are first time users, they adopted the digital services out of necessity, or they would take help from their family members or someone to do the transactions. So going forward, we feel that it's a positive sign that in the future, when we introduce digital services, it will be easier to include this woman here. And in June, what we did was to understand the impact of our digital interventions. We conducted a survey, and there was about 1,634 female participants who, where we found was about 77% of them have their own phones. And among the 77%, 76% have their digital wallets. And 37% of the 1,634 participants opened the wallet for the first time during the pandemic. Also, another thing that we saw, which was quite interesting, is that 41% of this woman who received the fund went to the agent themselves to do the cash out. And 89% of the total participants that we interviewed, they were happy to receive the cash digitally. Going on a different context, in a Bangladesh context, which we have seen is even with garment workers, a large portion of them whom are women, even they receive their wage through digital wallets. So from 1.5 million, it jumped to 4 million, which is like a 260% increase in wallets during the pandemic. So what I would like to conclude is that women are being included in the digital sphere. And if we left the market, if we left it to the market, then the gap will increase. So we need to intervene and design more client-centric digital products and services for low-income women. Thank you.
Fantastic, Moonmoon. I think the opportunity, I mean, the expansion in the digital wallets, as you have seen from the data, is very, very interesting. And I also love your point on how, one has to be intentional about bridging it. And that's why, you've seen some of these successes. I think there's a very clear link on that. Renana, I'll come back to you very briefly, just to, how, I know that what you have looked at is, how the financial distress has also caused loss in assets, etc., on the economic resources side. What's happened around social norms? Do you have any understanding of, have they become, more aggressive within households? How is control and decision making being affected when it comes to digital assets? Any insights on that?
So far, we haven't got any insights on that particular topic, but we speak to our staff very frequently, and we try to understand that whether giving this digital wallets or the transfer to the digital wallets created any conflict in the households or not. But so far, what we have seen is that's not really the case. And as I mentioned, that since our participants, the women participants, they were themselves happy to receive the cash digitally. So we haven't heard anything like that yet.
Thanks, Moonmoon. Renana Ben, from your perspective?
Actually, I also would agree with Moonmoon that we haven't seen a huge change in the social norms, but I'd like to point out that again, if we look at fault lines, women's work, that is the economic norms or the social norms relating to work, women's work is considered less important. And any women's work that was dependent in some way on digital access has suffered. And I'd like to give at least three examples. Firstly, as I said, that women's phones were not recharged. And many of our members, SEWA members, are domestic workers. and they had no way to reach their employers, except through their phones. And because they could not reach the employers, they could not get any wages. Even their back wages were not paid. And nor did they know from the employers when they could come to work. And so there was a lot of problems that these domestic workers faced. The second example I have is that there was a big increase, interestingly, in fintech workers. Especially what in India is called the bank correspondents, business correspondents. That is those people who are attached to banks and actually go door to door and withdraw money and give and take savings. And in SEWA, we've had many women business correspondents, and they did very, very well during the lockdown. But the banks wanted more and more. They were ready to pay for more business correspondents, but they absolutely refused to get women. They said, no, we want men business correspondents. And that is because that particular social norm where they preferred men actually made work of women worse. There could have been a big opportunity for women. And one more thing I'd like to point out again, the government, as I said earlier, has been very positive on benefits to women. And one of the big benefits that exist in the country are women's names on ration cards. So women own the ration cards. However, during the lockdown, those who did not have ration cards got other means like e-coupons. And again, because these e-coupons required digital access, it was the men who got the e-coupons and not the women. So the food which was coming in began coming in the men's name and not in the women's name. So it's not that new social norms were created, it's just that the old social norms made sure that things became somewhat worse for women. Sorry to be so negative, but that's what.
No, Renana, but I think it's good for us to hear all perspectives. And Moonmoon, you guys have done a lot of work on building confidence, something that Akhand pointed out also in his presentation. What are some of the strategies that you think have worked? Because you're saying this is positive, there's an opportunity. But how have you addressed that whole trust deficit or that confidence building mandate?
Yeah, that's a very good question because this is something very important. What we have seen is that the client base that we work with, they're from different age, different education level. And so for each of them, we need to come up with something so that it can boost their confidence to use digital services. So even clients who are above 50, a lot of them, they do not feel confident to use these digital services. So it is evident that as a young and educated woman, as I mentioned earlier, that they feel more confident to use digital services. But still, among them, we often find clients who are unwilling to use digital services. Just a few days ago, I went for a field visit, and this woman who has phone, digital wallet, and she receives money from her husband who lives abroad. And I was telling her that, do you want to do transaction through mobile money or not? And what does she think about it? Her reaction to it was, no, I don't think I want to use it. I'm like, are you educated? She said, yes, but still she doesn't feel comfortable using it. So we have different reasons that I would like to say. Different reasons for people not having the confidence to use digital services, but I would like to mention 5 major ones for today. So first, what we do is we facilitate clients on how to avail digital services and make them understand the benefits of the service. That's a key thing that we do while we introduce digital services. Second, having easy to understand and more client-centric products so that they can adapt it better, more for clients. And third is strengthen women's digital skills. What we have seen is that when we assist them to do the transactions a couple of times, then they feel confident to do it themselves. Even for this woman, we know that once we try to convince her and do the transactions with her a few times, then she will feel confident. So it's also having a constant support or a focal person, a go-to person, so that whenever they think that they need help, they can come to someone. And our field officers are always there to support them. And the fourth one I would like to mention, which is a very important one, is consumer protection. Informing and creating awareness for clients about digital products, such as the price, or they shouldn't be sharing their PIN with agents. That's something very important. And a lot of times what we've seen is that our clients are victims of fraudsters, so for which they fear doing digital transactions, because once they receive these calls and they've become a victim, they've transferred the money to them, then they don't have the trust in this platform. So we constantly need to work towards it and make sure that we can aware them as much as we can so that they do not share such information with them. And the last one I would like to mention is for all of us to come together, all the stakeholders. It is for like microfinance institutions, mobile financial service providers, regulators, because we need to work to build an ecosystem, reduce the cash out charges, what we've seen in Bangladesh, which is quite high, increase the limits of cash in, cash out, and even maybe mobile financial service providers can give in cashback offers to our clients so that they feel that, so that they feel encouraged to make the payments. So I think through our experiences, what we have seen that people who are technology resistant can be brought into the digital ecosystem and start adopting new technology when they feel that the service is truly benefiting them. And we need to continue innovating new initiatives and put our clients first and better equip them to access financial services by integrating them into the digital ecosystem. Thank you.
Thanks, Moonmoon. And I think this is a good segue to move to the next part of the conversation, where let's just zoom out a little bit from, from the experiences on the ground to try and understand what's happening in the sector. And so I'll really move now to Krishna and Dr. Sita. But Krishna, before you go into the details, just one quick thing, just what are the specific barriers that you have seen break down over the last few months, over this period? I mean, if you were to sort of zoom out and just broadly think about the gender digital divide and about the broader sector, what according to you have been some of the sort of silver lining in breaking down barriers, really? Krishna, I think you're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Subhalakshmi. That's what I actually asked. Is all good with audio video, but thank you. Good morning, everyone. Let me first begin with acknowledging everything that Renana Ben said, right? Has COVID-19 had a disproportionately negative impact on women? Absolutely. But at the same time, I also think there have been some changes that I believe will have a positive effect. So I'd like to focus my argument on that. And the first and most important change I see is at the mindset level. You know, one of my favorite saying goes, some people change out of inspiration while most of us change out of desperation. And I believe that the pandemic has changed mindsets and legitimized the need for digital among individuals and institutions alike. And that's more of a forward-looking sort of medium-term perspective. The pre-pandemic perception about use of mobile phones among low-income families, especially women, was something, you know, at times of taboo, and at best, it was something that is good to have but not need to have. I believe that has radically shifted. It is increasingly seen as a convenient gateway for accessing all critical services, including commerce, education, as well as healthcare. And I should also add, you know, one of the fundamental reasons that we discussed, you mentioned Akhand and Ishita in your research, was related to distrust of new technologies, which was the reason behind low uptake of DFS. So I believe it will change, and it will be interesting to see how that evolves after the pandemic. The mindset shift is perhaps even more radical at the institutional level. So it has fast-tracked a lot of institutions' digital transformation strategy. What they were looking at achieving over the next 5 to 10 years, they had to do in 5 to 10 weeks. And what was perhaps a priority number 5 became a priority number 1. It's amazing how many institutions have so quickly adopted to providing their services over digital, and this trend will only continue. Another simple but impactful example, I believe, is the idea of working from home, right? And the flexibility around your work location, which I think will also positively affect millions of women and men. It still amuses me how a majority of institutions who were totally, against the idea of working from home are now so open and even more importantly, committed to it in the long run. It takes years to affect a mindset change like this among individuals, large corporations, and governments. Something that otherwise would have taken years has taken weeks. Let's take a practical example for Bangladesh RMG sector, which employs about 4 million women, 80% of 4 million individuals, 80% of whom are women. A lot of donors, including us and some other donors in the room, like Gates Foundation, have been working for years to convince banks and factories to open account for these RMG workers. And over the years, we managed to open a few 100,000 accounts. Come the pandemic, the government instructed sort of all banks and wallet providers to open every RMG worker's account on a war footing, all digitally. They were able to open close to 1 million accounts in a matter of few months, transfer money, something that normally would have taken years. Similar trends in Colombia. I'll make my last point here. Back to the big picture, there is also a really interesting insight from the Spanish flu pandemic, which we all like to draw parallel with. In 1918, there is a really well-researched and argued NY Times article, and basically it says how the Spanish flu pandemic, while extremely punishing for women in the short run, was also a catalyst for women's voting right bill, and also led to a mindset change about the role of women in society. The number of women that were able to get to public roles after the pandemic was almost unimaginable before it. And I'll stop here in the interest of time, and we'll share the link of article if you're interested.
Super, thanks, Krishna. Just you're bringing to light some of these unprecedented advances that have happened in very short time, out of compulsion even maybe, is very, very interesting perspective. And I'll now request Dr. Sita to reflect on a little bit of, we know that ASEAN and a lot of the intergovernmental spaces have really been looking at regional sort of economic recovery efforts, etc. And digital is at the heart of it. Moonmoon touched a little bit upon how there is a role for all of us to come together. So we'd just like to hear from you, Dr. Sita, about what do you think is the role you see for governments, for private sector, for regulators, and also, for this maybe civil society and research community? I mean, how do all of these different actors in the ecosystem come together? What is each one's role? Would be great to hear your reflections on that.
Okay, hi. Good morning from Jakarta. First of all, thank you very much for having us from the ASEAN Secretariat here. I think having been listening to all the speakers, I think it's important for us to first address the points of the COVID-19 pandemic and gender digital divide, that it has, of course, the effects are not exactly dichotomized, but if left unaddressed, ASEAN as a region, we also recognize that if left unaddressed, it might exacerbate the gender digital divide within the region. In terms of the roles of the governments as well as the private sector and other stakeholders, I think it's very clear that for the governments, with their key responsibilities more on the policy strategy side, they need to acknowledge that what we call digital solutions may not be solutions that are ready for everyone, or not everyone may be ready for these digital solutions as a very generic narrative coming with the COVID-19 pandemic. For women, it's important, and ASEAN is working towards that approach to also acknowledge that it's not only gender digital divide, because gender is not only one element affecting the lives of all women, but we are trying to embrace intersectional divides, if I can say so, or intersectional lens to look to look at this digital divide. So for example, maybe women from rural areas, their location and them being women might cause the compounded vulnerabilities for them in the context of COVID-19, for example. So first, the government needs to address the solutions that are inclusive. It has to acknowledge, of course, all the intersectionalities involving in all the concept and the realities of inequalities and vulnerabilities. For the private sector, of course, we are promoting the public-private partnership. There are ample rooms for them to work together. And I think most of the speakers have also addressed, apart from the contribution on resources mobilization, the synergies on capital, and both in terms of social capital and financial capital in helping women have better access, have better understanding in terms of the use of the digital platforms, the use of the mobile phones and all this. I think the private sector will play a critical role in changing the norms, the corporate norms, which the government sector can also adopt. The work-life balance, the work from home arrangement using all these innovative platforms and more flexible arrangement. And that will touch upon the third point that I would like to address, that for the CSOs, for the government and for the private sector, there's an urgent need. And I think it's even more pertinent now with the COVID-19 pandemic to address the issue of unpaid care and domestic work. So the fact that in the context of COVID-19, with the confinement and all this social distancing, putting people in their homes, of course, for their safety, women have borne a really heavy care responsibilities, and these need to be addressed in line with when we address the gender digital divide. Because of course, digital solutions is one thing, but having time and having the mental space to really embrace these digital solutions is another thing. So these are very quickly the three key points I would like to address for now. The issue of intersectionality, the issue of changing social norms through synergies and partnerships, and the issue of addressing unpaid care work in line with to build the readiness and the preparedness to capitalize on the digital solutions. Thank you very much.
This is extremely insightful, Dr. Sita, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I think there's so much that you're talking about, how institutions, I mean, Krishna spoke a little bit about how institutions are changing their ways of working, they're thinking about, widening some of these, the scope of their digital interventions. And you spoke about how that can be transformative, right? I mean, how that can actually hit at some of the structural barriers, whether it's unpaid work, whether it's the exclusion due to, certain kinds of identities, or the intersectionality piece that you spoke about. Absolutely critical, I think, to keep in mind as we move ahead. So I'll come back again to you, Krishna. So, I mean, just in the interest of the debate, let's hear from both you and Dr. Sita. Will the digital divide persist, or will it not persist? What do you think? Where do you think we are going from here?
Maybe Krishna can go first.
Certainly, yeah.
Sure, Sita and Subhalakshmi, thank you. So, expanding on some of the previous points and keeping all the moral arguments aside, it is often the way I think it's often helpful to examine how and whether the incentives across the board are aligned or not to make that happen, right? So let's look at the government level. If you see, I think there is a near consensus among most governments that increasing women's role and participation in the economy is critical to any country's growth. From countries like Japan, where one of their major policy pillars has been womenomics for several years, to some of the even more conservative countries who are at their own pace, removing or reducing some of the barriers. So there is a strong incentive and push there. And I believe post the pandemic, governments around the world may rethink regulatory and policy barriers that keep low-income populations, especially including women, from accessing digital. Now, similar incentives across the private sector, as the male market saturates and as women command a rapidly growing control over global wealth. Currently, about 32% of global wealth is controlled by women, but the growth of that segment is outpacing any other segments. So there is a strong impetus among corporates to innovate and expand to new segments. I work out of an innovation lab, and Singapore is a hub of innovation labs. Almost no innovation lab will not have a focus on women. And women being one of the most important segments for a large majority of them, incumbents and startups alike. E-commerce and social commerce is already lowering barriers to entry for certain segments of women entrepreneurs. This, I believe, will expand going forward. Let's come to the third level, the family and social norms level. At the family level, I think it is a mixed bag and is where a majority of the challenges exist. While on one side, the pandemic has legitimized the need to use digital for commerce, education, healthcare, plus there is an increasing cost of living that puts pressure on women to work. However, we cannot deny that there are still some old and hard structural barriers that exist among families, plus our long history of inequality, all of which adds a few steps and barriers to that journey of going and using digital for the good and betterment of their lives. So while the current situation is far from ideal, equal, and there is still significant barriers that exist, all in all, I think if we simply look at the overall trends, examine the incentives that exist, I'm positive and hopeful that we are headed to a more equal world over a medium term, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Krishna, for bringing hope into this conversation. And over to you, Sita. We'd love to hear your perspectives.
Thank you very much. I think for me, I revert to my initial point that if all these are left unaddressed, of course, the digital divide, gender digital divide will persist. However, we also see the opportunities, the fact that we are discussing this issue now, amidst all the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. I think there are opportunities for us to, of course, reimagine and readdress this issue with the practical lived experiences of the pandemic. That gender digital divide is real, it needs to be addressed, it needs to be tackled, and there are so many layers into it, at the policy level, at the day-to-day level. I think that's most important, and also at the with the different actors coming into play. If all these are done, I think we have hope that the gender digital divide may be rectified. It will take time. I don't think COVID-19, even if it brings opportunities, will fix everything. It will take a lot of time. And I think the longest, maybe the most challenging part is the social norms, both in terms of what's going on in terms of the mental ecosystem, structural barriers, mental barriers, but also what's going on in terms of the empowerment from within. I think one of the speakers talked about the importance of confidence building. And I think that's very important for women to build confidence. And of course, women are not homogeneous group. We need to also understand maybe women working as, I don't know, the CEOs of some companies may have better access, better capital, better level of self-confidence and education and all that to really capitalize from the digital solutions, while other women, women with disabilities, women from certain marginalized communities, for example, we have yet to gather more data evidence. And I always use this word, the lived experiences, how they have lived through COVID-19 pandemic, using or not using, or maybe being scared of using all these digital platforms that we are really dependent on at the moment. So that's from my end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I know that we are running out of time, so we will probably not have the chance to go back for one more round. But I think in this debate, the nuance that we have heard from each of the speakers, both for and against the motion, I think it's it's absolutely, I think even within the short time, it's been a very deep conversation. I feel like we've touched upon so many things. As Akhand had pointed out earlier, like, there are so many factors about the elephant, about the rider, about the paths that we need to sort of sort out. But I think what I'm picking up also from this conversation is some core principles about what the ingredients of that ecosystem needs to be. It's not only about the elephant rider and the path, but it's also about, maybe the environment in which they're operating. And I think the 3-4 things that really stood out for me was, the shift in social norms, both the opportunity that has happened, but also in terms of our need to do more. And this is not just at the household and community level, but at institutional level, at the level of policy. I think all of you have touched upon that. That's the first. The second, of course, is the whole link of digital financial services and the digital access with a broader set of issues, which Renana, you spoke about, around norms around women's work and employment. And I think that's something we didn't talk about enough, but it's just something at the back of my mind that, I picked up from what you were saying is, are we thinking about the broader package of for building resilience as the objective of this webinar is. The third, of course, intersectionality. Men and women are not equal, and all women are also not equal. We heard about differences in age and literacy and rural, urban. We spoke about income levels being a defining factor in access, in the ability to control and exercise agency. So I think intersectionality is really critical. I think we heard a little bit also about only digital solutions may not be enough. The human touch is important. And I think that's really critical, whether it was in the sort of the banking correspondent model, Renana, you spoke about, or what Sita, you mentioned about, just the need for that human touch. And I imagine also for broader networks for women, and can digital be an enabler in that space as we move forward. So I do think that these are the critical principles that I am taking away also as we are speaking both for and against the motion. And I feel that there is a lot of work cut out for us as we make the most of the opportunity, as we, as in the Gates Foundation. And I'm glad my colleague Jamie Zimmerman is there, because she's leading a lot of this work. We speak about digitizing, we talk about directing resources into the hands of women, and we speak of designing gender transformative policies and programs, which is really going to have real impact and real change in the lives of women. So I'll just leave you there with the 3 Ds of digitize, direct, and design. And I'm going to hand over now to Sonal from MSC, because she has some exciting activities planned for the next part of the session.
Thank you. Thank you, Subhalakshmi. That was a riveting debate. And hello, everyone. I am Sonal. I'm part of MSC's gender team. And I'm sure by now you've also picked your sides. I would take you through the last leg of the session, wherein we'll break out into breakout groups. And this is very important because we don't want to let you go till we've heard your experiences, your insights, and especially given the pandemic situation, it's very important for all of us to learn from each other. And that's why we do want to have these breakout groups of 10 minutes each. I will just share my screen.
Sunil?
So, yeah.
Hi. Sorry. Before we begin the breakout session, we have another after poll that we promised the audience. So, Daniel, if you could queue up the last poll, and we'll see how the debate.
Let's do that. Wow.
Oh, come on, people. 88% said yes before. 2% and counting. 83, 84. Oh. Let's chalk that to margin of error, probably. All right.
I'll give 10 more seconds and close the poll.
Okay.
Great. So the debate did sway some of you. I see that from 88 to 81% yeses now. Great.
Okay, over to you, Nasa.
So now for the last leg of the session, we will break out into groups. And if you see your chat window, you will find a link to this Google document that you see on my screen right now. I would just give you all a second to please click on the link that you see in the chat window and access and open this Google document. So I hope all of you have this Google document open with you right now. So let's quickly go through, the slides a little bit. So on the first slide, please go and type the name of all your group members in your name. Then we move to the second slide where you see instructions for each of the breakout groups, and you also see 3 topics for discussion. So I would urge, because we just have 10 minutes for the breakout sessions each, we will request you to please pick one out of these topics and discuss and pen down your thoughts in the third slide. That is where you see the yellow boxes. So please feel free to add one more slide if you think you have more insights to add. And please go and type your insights into the slides that mention the number of your breakout group. And all of you would be automatically led to your breakout group after I close. So those were the quick instructions. I hope it's all sorted, and we will close in 10 minutes, and you will choose one question each to discuss in your group. Please assign somebody to take notes and put and pen down your thoughts on the slides. And now if you're all set, we can break out into the groups.
Hello, we're all back.
Great.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope it was an engaging session for all of you. And I'm sure you also got to know the other participants in the room. So that's great. And we will definitely compile all the feedback and the insights that you've given us and shared with us on the slides. And we'll come back to you in a few weeks from now with all of those insights compiled. And we also request you to please carry forward these discussions in your own community of practice. We definitely want that these discussions should continue even after the session. And so that's it from me. I will now hand over to Yasmin for her closing remarks. Thank you so much, Yasmin. Would you now take over?
Thank you. Big thanks to the MicroSave consulting team who helped put together such a fantastic session. I did drop a link to an evaluation form in the chat, and also a link to our FinEquity homepage where you can find a link to sign up for our discussion platform, because I think the key takeaway for me is, that I'm really leaving this session very hopeful that we are having the right conversations with the right people. Everybody's very dedicated, everybody's very intelligent, everybody's very engaged. And so I would love to have the conversations keep going on our FinEquity D Groups platform, whether it's initiated by one of us or by you yourselves. And please do share all the resources that you have created or that you know of in our community of practice platforms. So thank you. It looks like the survey link is not working. We will also send it in the follow-up emails that we send. Oh, Matt does say that it is working. So please do try it, but you will also receive it by email after the fact, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you, everybody.
It is working, and I just pasted it again.
Great, thank you, Etta. And Daniel, maybe we stay on the line for another 5 minutes just in case anybody has any questions they want to address to us in the chat function. And then we can go to bed here in Washington, D.C., where it is midnight.
Yay!
And in India, we can have
Thank you,
some
guys.
Good night.
Thanks for staying up so late. This was great, and you've been a great audience. So it's been a pleasure hosting this. I hope we get to do this again soon.
Thank you, MicroSave, and thank you, FinEquity.
Thank you, Guna.
Thank you.
Yes, good
Thank you,
afternoon.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening and day ahead. Bye.
Bye-bye.